Good evening, everyone. Tonight's class is dedicated in loving memory of my dear mother, Rivka Bas Rab Shloimeh. In addition, it's also dedicated in loving memory of my grandfather, my mother's father, Shlomo, Zaidi Shlomo.
Zichronim livracha.
His yard site, Chai Elul today. So we're continuing with the fourth and final chapter of Masechtas Rosh Hashanah. Yom Tov shel Rosh Hashanah shel Chaliyos b'Shabbos. What happens if Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos? So what's the discussion here? What are we talking about? Chazal, the rabbis, made a decree.
You can blow.
They made a decree that when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, although there's a positive commandment to sound the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, nevertheless, they were afraid that in people's eagerness to fulfill the mitzvah, they're going to have a shofar, and there's lots of laws related to the shofar. And they're going to have a question about how to sound the shofar, or whether or not this shofar is acceptable as a kosher shofar for Rosh Hashanah. And they were afraid that on Shabbos, without realizing it, they would take the Hamonam, the general population, would take the shofar into a Shus HaRabim, into a public domain. And of course we know that according to the Torah law prohibits carrying in a public domain or taking from a private domain to a public domain and vice versa. And so because of this concern, so our sages forbade sounding the shofar on Rosh Hashanah for the general population. So now the Mishnah says, Yom Tov shel Rosh Hashanah shel Chaliyos b'Shabbos, the Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah that fell out on Shabbos, B'Mikdash hayu soikim, in the Beis HaMikdash, they would sound the shofar. And the reason they sounded the shofar in the Beis HaMikdash is because we say, Ein Shvus B'Mikdash. There's a general rule that rabbinic prohibitions that get in the way of performances of mitzvahs and things that they need to do at the Beis HaMikdash are suspended. So we don't take in consideration rabbinical prohibitions. Generally speaking, there are exceptions to that. Now, just to clarify, there's a positive commandment to sound the shofar. But the rabbis are given the authority to make fences and prohibitions for a Sheva al Taseh. In other words, you're not going to violate the Torah, you're just going to refrain from fulfilling a positive commandment based on their enactments. And that's acceptable. So, let's continue. B'Mikdash hayu soikim, so they would sound the shofar in the Beis HaMikdash. And the Rambam understands this to mean, as you'll see from the wording of the Mishnah, it fits in somewhat, that it doesn't only mean in the Beis HaMikdash, but rather in all of Yerushalayim. Avaloi b'Medina, but not in the provinces, which means anywhere out of Yerushalayim, one would not be sounding the shofar. This is the way it once was. Shechar Beis HaMikdash, once the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, so now the place where they would sound the shofar was destroyed. Most of the Jews had left Yerushalayim, so Yerushalayim was now pretty much vacant. So where are they going to sound the shofar? On Shabbos. Hiskim Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai enacted and instituted Sheyusoikin b'chol mokim sheyesh boi besdin. He instituted that wherever there's a court, they can sound the shofar there. Now, again, I remind you, what was the reason they said we shouldn't sound the shofar on Shabbos in the provinces? Is because we're concerned somebody's going to carry the shofar in order to ask a question. However, at the court, we don't need to worry about such a thing. We can rely on the fact that the judges and the learned scholars who were to hang around by the courts would prevent such a thing from happening. So this is an enactment from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Omer Rabbi Elazar says, he explains, Lo yiskan Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai el b'yavna bilvad. after the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, so the great Sanhedrin moved to Yavna. And according to Rabbi Elazar, his opinion is that when did Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai establish that they can sound the shofar away from the Beis Hamikdash at a court is only at the great court. So it was a court of 71 members, 71 sages, and there in that great court, one can sound the shofar. But in a small court, in the jurisdiction courts, one would not be allowed to. This is according to Rabbi Elazar. Amrullah, they said to him, Lo yachad Yavna, Amrullah, they said to him, Echad Yavna, whether it be Yavna, Echad Mikol Makom Sheyesh Bo Bezdin, anywhere that they have a Beis Din, they would be allowed to sound the shofar. Now, it seems like there's three statements, and it seems like the first one and the third one agree with each other. However, the Gemara explains that when you have three Jews, there's three opinions. It's not three Jews and two opinions. The first one says, according to the first opinion, any Bezdin, a local Bezdin, so long as there's a Bezdin there, that would be sufficient to prevent somebody from carrying a shofar on Shabbos, and they were allowed to sound the shofar after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. According to Rabbi Elazar, only in Yavna. That's the only place. It was a big Bezdin, prominent Bezdin, only there. The third opinion, they said to him, whoever they were, they say that they don't agree to the first, on the first one. Rather, what do they hold? They hold that any place that has a big and prominent Bezdin that's permanently affixed, as it was in Yavna, then they would be able to sound the shofar on Shabbos. So we have three different opinions there. So now we see that Yerushalayim, so we said before that the Rambam understands that it wasn't just in the Beis Hamikdash that they can sound the shofar, but anywhere in Yerushalayim. So now the Mishnah Beis is coming to tell us other things, that Yerushalayim had a superior aspect to it and a quality to it and a preference to it over other places. More than this, I see Yerushalayim Yisrael al Yavna. Yerushalayim was greater than Yavna in another aspect. Shekol ir shehi araya v'shem ma'as v'kreiva yichel alavay teikin. It wasn't just that in the city of Yerushalayim they were able to sound the shofar, but rather, if there was three conditions met, they can sound the shofar even elsewhere. First of all, you had to be able to see Yerushalayim. You had to be able to hear the shofar being sounded from Yerushalayim. And Ukreivan had to be within 2,000 amos of Yerushalayim. So if there was a place that was very close, you can hear, but you couldn't see because there was a wall there, that wouldn't meet all three conditions. But the point here is that if you had all of these three items, all these three conditions, then even outside of Yerushalayim was considered like Yerushalayim in this respect, and such places can sound the shofar even on Shabbos. However, over Yavna, but in the Yavna, by the Yavna Beis Din, lo yoseikin el bebeis din bavad. They would only sound the shofar at the court. That's it. So even in the whole city where Yavna, they were not sounding the shofar, only at the court. So here you see a way that Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash was much greater than Yavna. Come on up. Gimel. Bereshayna, originally, so now, what are we talking about here? We were just concluded a Mishnah that told us that the practice during the Beis Hamikdash, the practice during the times of the Beis Hamikdash, was different after the practice was different from after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of an enactment by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So our Mishnah is going to tell us other such enactments that were proposed and established by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Originally, when the Beis Hamikdash stood, people would wave the Lulav and Esrog all 7 days in the Beis Hamikdash. However, in the provinces, the waving of the Lulav and Esrog only took place on the first day of Sukkot. When the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai established Sheyehilulav Nitel b'Medina Shiva Zechel HaMikdash, that everywhere, not just in the Beis Hamikdash, but everywhere, we should wave the Lulav and Esrog all 7 days of Sukkot. And of course, this carries on until today, except for Shabbos, of course. Zechel HaMikdash. So this is done so that the memory of the Beis Hamikdash will remain fresh in our mind. The mitzvah outside the Beis Hamikdash is only 1 day, and we're going to perform the mitzvah for 7 days. Being that's the case, so we'll remember, why are we doing this? Zechel HaMikdash. Also, he also established that the 16th day of Nisan, the new grain would be Aser. The way it works is that new grain that had taken root before Pesach, once they brought the Omer sacrifice, can now be eaten. New grain was not allowed to be eaten until this sacrifice was waived. It's called the Omer because it was a measurement of an Omer. In any case, in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, outside of the Beis Hamikdash, we didn't know when it exactly took place. So after noontime, they had assumed that this offering had already been made, and so that they can already start eating the new grain was now considered old. However, once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai established that the entire day of the 16th, one may not eat the new grain, and it's not considered old grain until the end of the day. Why? Fascinating reason. We've studied this in Masechta Sukkos. The reason is because, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, he maintained that the Beis Hamikdash could be rebuilt and established anytime during that day, and somebody could come, and what will happen is that later in that day, the Kohen would wave the offering, and so we would have falsely assumed that we should be eating the new grain as it's now considered old before the actual offering was performed.
There was another thing. If you waited until the afternoon, there was a presumption that the Kohanim would be shikr.
That's nothing to do with this. Yeah. That has to do with other things. Originally, they would accept testimony from witnesses that they saw the new moon all day. Once the witnesses were late in coming, and the Levim didn't know what to sing. It was the 30th day of Elul. They didn't know if today is going to be Rosh Hashanah or tomorrow is going to be Rosh Hashanah, and so they didn't sing. They couldn't sing anything because they didn't know if it's the 30th day, if it's Erev Rosh Hashanah or Rosh Hashanah itself. So they established they established they're only going to interrogate witnesses until Mincha. After Mincha, we're not accepting witnesses any longer, which would mean that they would be able to sing the shir of the 30th day on that day, and without worry that it would be established as Rosh Hashanah. But if they came from Mincha onward, so now, while we wouldn't interrogate them, they would establish both days as Rosh Chodesh. But the real Rosh Chodesh would be the 31st day, would be the first of the new month. Once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, once the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, so now we no longer have to worry that the Levim will have difficulty with their songs, knowing which song to perform, because there's no Beis Hamikdash and they're not performing a song. So he reverted the old system of accepting witnesses the entire day. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha said, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai established more than this. What did he establish? Shafilu reish beis din b'chol makim. If the head of the beis din, the head of the court, is anywhere else other than the court, lo yu eidim ha'ichlum ela l'makom avad. They would only go to the place that we discussed earlier, the place where they would gather, to the court system. They wouldn't go to the head of the beis din. Anyone else from the court would be able to be mekadesh the chodesh. So it went from the person to the place and the people. And this was also established by Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Hey, say the brachas. We're getting on to the davening. How does the davening work on Rosh Hashanah? Leimer Aves, we say like Avram, like Yitzchak, like Yaakov, like we say every day. So we say the bracha of Avos, known as fathers. Ugvures, Ato Gibur Leilam Hashem, Chaimesim Ato, Kedushas Hashem, Ato Kodesh, Hashem Kodesh, Uchilul Malchi Esimam, and we include words of kingship in it, Hamelach HaKodesh, and so on and so forth. But we do not sound the shofar at that point in the davening. Kedushas Hayom, we continue with talking about the day, the blessings of the day. Zechrenes, the remembrances. These are verses that are called the remembrances. And I'm sorry, Kedushas Hayom v'Seikeya. We talk about the Kedusha of the day, then we sound the shofar. Zechrenes, the remembrances v'Seikeya, and we sound the shofar. Shofores v'Seikeya, we talk about the shofar, psukim about shofar, and we sound the shofar. V'Eimer Avodah, we say the Avodah, Ritzei Hashem Elokeinu, V'Haidah, and the Moedim, Berachas Kohanim, the blessings of the priest. Divrei Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri essentially is saying, giving the order that we have today, and he's saying that after the Kedushas Hashem and the Malchios, we don't sound the shofar. Amar Rabbi Akiva says, if we're not mentioning the Malchios, if we're not sounding the shofar at the Malchios, the verses of kingship, why are we mentioning it there? In other words, he's of the opinion, not that we should mention it, but that we should sound the shofar there. So he says the following: we sound the shofar by the Aves. We say, Eloimer Aves Ugvures, Ugedushas Hashem. We say the blessings of the fathers, Gvures of Ata Gibor, Kedushas Hashem of Ata Kodesh, Uchil Malchis Ima, Kedushas Hayom. We include verses of kingship for the holiness of the day, in that section of the liturgy. We say Keyan, we sound the shofar. Then we move on to Zechrenis, the remembrances. We say Keyan, we sound the shofar. Shefares, verses of shofar, and the Keyan, we sound the shofar again. And we say the Moedim, the Ritzei, Moedim, Berachas Kohanim. That's actually the way we do it today. Mishnah Vav Ein Peichsin Yasar Malchis. We do not say fewer than 10 verses that talk about the kingship of God. Yasar Zachrenias, and no fewer than 10 of remembrances. Masar Shofres, no fewer than 10 verses that discuss the shofar. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Omer, Imam Shalish Shalish Mekulan Yatza. He says, well, 10 is the best way to do it. If you do a minimum of 3 of each, you have fulfilled your obligation. Ein maskirin zichrein malchus v'shefer shel Qur'aniyos. When we choose out verses, this is of course before our sages established what the verses will be. The earlier days is you can say any verses that you want. You can pick whichever one you want. Says the Mishnah, you do not mention verses that talk about, that are in the context of punishment and difficulties for the Jewish people. You pick favorable ones on Rosh Hashanah. He says you start with verses from the Torah and you continue and you finish with ones from the Navi, because we're picking verses that are spanning the Tanakh. Rabbi Yossi says, Im Hishlam Batera Yotza. Rabbi Yossi says, there's actually an amended Mishnah in the Gemara. He says that it's preferable that you end with verses from the Torah as well, not just begin. Zion. A person who is leading the services. Means he's davening by moment. On the Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah, Hasheni Maskia. So the second person, the second chazan, meaning to say, who's the second chazan here? When do we sound the shofar? During which service? During the Musaf service. So who's the second chazan? The second chazan is the person who, the Baal Shachris. So says the Mishnah, whoever's davening Musaf, the first chazan, which is called the second chazan here, is the one who sounds the shofar. Mishasa Hallel, and when he recites Hallel, somebody's going to ask, what's Hallel doing here? Do we say Hallel in Rosh Hashanah? No, we don't. So we have to understand the Mishnah that we're not talking about Rosh Hashanah here. We've changed conversations. On other holidays, so Mishasa Hallel, on holidays that we recite Hallel, Harishin Makres Hallel, the first chazan, is the one who says the Hallel. Now, who is the first Hallel in this case? For one who recite is the Baal Shachris. So it's an interesting difference in terminology here. Shofar shel Rosh Hashanah ein marvin alav esatchum. A shofar for Rosh Hashanah that we need to sound for Rosh Hashanah. So you cannot travel past the tchum to bring it, even though the tchum, the amount, the distance was established by the rabbis. The exact 2,000 cubic feet is established by the rabbis. You can't go past it in order to bring a shofar for Rosh Hashanah. And you cannot remove a heap of stones from above the shofar, which is also a Gzeira D'Rabbanan. Removing stones on Shabbos is a muktzah situation. Muktzah is all from the rabbis. So even though it's only an enactment from the rabbis, one cannot violate this enactment in order to be able to perform, to find the shofar. You cannot climb a tree. Again, this is an enactment from the rabbis, not to climb trees on Shabbos. You can't ride on an animal, which is again also an enactment from the rabbis. According to the Torah, you would be able to ride an animal on Shabbos. And you cannot swim on the water, on open water. This is again an enactment from the rabbis. You can't cut the shofar, not with the thing that is with a shvus, and not with something that is prohibited because of the rabbis, and certainly not something that is from a negative commandment, which is in the Torah, generally speaking, when you have a positive commandment and a negative commandment, the negative commandment is suspended. In this case, it's not. But if he wants to put water or wine into it, he may do so. This helps clear the sound. We do not prevent children from practicing to sound the shofar. Rather, you can help them not to sound the shofar unnecessarily, but you can help them learn to sound the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Whoever is practicing the sounding of the shofar, lo yotzi, does not fulfill his obligation. Rather, chivin libo, you have to have intention to fulfill the mitzvah. A person who hears the shofar being sounded by somebody who's practicing lo yotza does not fulfill his obligation either. Seder tkiya sholish sholish al sholish 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 is 3, 3, and 3. 3 sets of 3. Shir tkiya k'sholish truos. The length of a tkiya is like 3 truos. Shir trua k'sholish yaboves. The length of 3 truas. This is talking about a shever. Here is the size of 3, what we call today truas. Talk about a sheinu mashach b'shniya k'shtayim. If a person blew the first tkiya and then prolonged the second 2, like the second one, like 2, ein biyodei ala achas. He's only the first one that he sounded is acceptable. Misha berach, person who recited a blessing of Musaf, he started Musaf because he didn't have a shofar. And then they gave him a shofar. So they brought him a shofar into shul. Let's say the shul didn't have a shofar. And he's Musaf. So what does he do now? So once Musaf is over, can he still sound the shofar? Says the Mishnah, he sounds the shofar, Tkiya and Etrua 3 times, and he fulfills his obligation. Just like a shliach tzibur is required to first recite the Amidah silently, so too everybody who knows how to daven is required to first recite the Amidah silently and then hear from the Chazan. But in other words, the only person who doesn't have to daven is a person who doesn't know how to daven, and that's why we established the repetition for the Amidah. But here what the Mishnah is saying, according to this opinion, if you know how to daven, you have to daven. Rabbi Gamliel says, Shliach tzibur moitzias harabim yidei chivasan. Rabbi Gamliel says, not so. Even if you know how to daven, technically speaking, the Shliach tzibur can fulfill your obligation for the Amidah. It's like Masechtas Rosh Hashanah. We have concluded the Masechta of Rosh Hashanah. Mazel Tov. Mazel Tov. Please join us next week, Wednesday, for Masechtas Tainas, a new Masechta. Talks about fasting. It's a very interesting Masechta. Next week, 8:30 p.m., same place. Have a good evening.